Before we dive into this creepy tale, like, share, and subscribe, because you won't want to miss what happens next. Trust me, this story will keep you on the edge of your seat until the very end. You won't be able to stop watching, or wondering what's lurking behind every corner. All right, let's get into it. St. Margaret's High School had a reputation, not for being the best at sports or academics, but for something much darker. The kind of place where whispers filled the halls more than laughter, where the walls seemed to breathe a heavy, secretive air. There was an unspoken rule among the students: never, ever go near the old wing. Most kids didn't even question it. They just knew. But Anna, the new transfer student, didn't know any of that. She was starting fresh, moving to a new town with her mom, looking for something she couldn't quite put her finger on. A new beginning, or so she thought. On her first day, she felt it. The kind of unease that prickles the back of your neck, the kind of feeling you can't shake, no matter how hard you try. The school was huge, old stone walls, flickering lights, and long hallways that seemed endless. But the old wing, the one everyone avoided, it felt different. It felt like it was holding its breath, waiting for something. Anna noticed it right away, the way people spoke about the school, but never quite said the whole story. They'd laugh it off, but there was always that something they weren't sharing. And then there was the whispering, faint, like a distant hum, something just out of reach. It was during a class assignment that Anna first found herself wandering into the old wing. The air turned colder as she stepped into the narrow hallway, and the hairs on her arms stood up. The sound of her shoes echoed loudly as she walked, and she couldn't shake the feeling that something, was watching her. She paused. Was it the wind? Or was it something else? The longer she stayed, the more she felt that pull, the whispering, like something or someone was calling her. And that's when it happened. A shadow, flickering at the far end of the hall. No one else was around. No sounds except her own breath. Anna's heart raced, but something deeper inside urged her to take a step closer. Was it a trick of the light? Or was it something real? She walked toward it, her footsteps growing louder, until the shadow disappeared around the corner. She didn't turn back. Anna stood still for a moment, her breath caught in her throat. Her mind raced, trying to make sense of what she had just seen. Was it a person? A ghost? Or was it just her imagination playing tricks on her? She wanted to turn back, but something inside her, some deep, unexplainable force, urged her forward. It was as though the old wing was calling her, drawing her in. She slowly walked down the hallway, the floor creaking beneath her feet with every step. The silence was deafening. The windows were cracked, and the cold air seeped through, biting at her skin. The walls, covered in peeling paint, seemed to close in around her, and she could feel her heart pounding in her chest. She didn't know why, but she couldn't leave. Not yet. As she reached the corner where the shadow had disappeared, Anna's hand instinctively reached out to touch the wall, as if it might offer some kind of comfort. But the wall was ice cold. She shuddered and pulled her hand away. The hallway stretched out in front of her, and at the end of it, she could see a faint light shining through an open door. Her curiosity grew stronger. She couldn't stop herself. She stepped forward, her pulse quickening. The door was cracked open just enough for her to slip through. She pushed it gently, and it creaked on its hinges, opening to reveal a room that was unlike any she had seen before in the school. It was dark, dusty, and filled with old furniture covered in sheets. Papers were scattered across the floor, and a thick layer of dust had settled over everything. But what caught her attention was the photograph on the wall. It was old, so old that the edges were curled, and the faces in the picture had begun to fade. But there was one girl, standing with a teacher, her smile frozen in time. She couldn't have been more than 14, with short brown hair and a look in her eyes that seemed so alive, so full of hope. Anna took a step closer to the photo, her eyes locked on the girl's face. There was something about her, something Anna couldn't put her finger on. As she stared at the photograph, a loud bang suddenly echoed behind her. Anna froze. Her heart skipped a beat. She spun around, but the room was empty. The silence returned, heavier this time. Her breath was shallow. Her legs felt like jelly, and every instinct in her screamed to leave. But she couldn't. Something about that girl in the photo felt too familiar. She took a deep breath, trying to calm herself. As she turned back to the photograph, she heard it. A whisper. Faint at first, but then clearer. "Help me." Anna's breath hitched. She looked around, but there was no one. The whisper seemed to come from the walls themselves, as if the entire room was alive, trying to speak to her. Was it the girl in the photo? Or was it something else? Her head spun with questions she didn't know how to answer. Before she could process it, a sharp, cold breeze swept through the room, making her skin crawl. She shivered and instinctively wrapped her arms around herself. The temperature had dropped so suddenly that she could see her breath fogging in the air. The whispering grew louder, more frantic. Anna couldn't understand why, but she needed to know more. The photograph, the shadow, the whispers. Everything was connected. The deeper she went, the more tangled the mystery became. But one thing was clear. The old wing was hiding something. Something Anna couldn't ignore. Anna didn't know how long she had been standing there, staring at the photograph. The room felt suffocating now, as if the air had thickened around her. Her heart pounded in her chest, the whispers growing louder with every breath she took. She could almost feel the weight of the past pressing in on her, suffocating her, trapping her in this moment. Suddenly she heard footsteps, heavy, slow. They echoed down the hallway, growing closer. Anna's heart skipped. Who else was in the school? She hadn't seen anyone when she entered the old wing. She spun around, expecting to see someone, but the hallway outside the room was empty. The footsteps continued, growing louder, and yet there was no one there. Then the door slammed shut. The sound was deafening. It reverberated through the entire building, sending a shock of panic straight to Anna's spine. She ran to the door, but it wouldn't budge. It was locked. Her breath became shallow, her hands trembling as she pressed against the cold wood. She pulled, pushed, but it was no use. She was trapped. "Help me." The whisper echoed once more, but this time, it wasn't coming from the walls. It was right behind her. Anna spun around, her heart racing in her chest. The room was empty, yet she could feel something. A presence. A cold, suffocating presence. The temperature in the room had dropped even further. Anna's skin prickled with fear. She couldn't move. She couldn't think. The room was spinning, her mind trying to grasp at something, anything that made sense. The voice. Was it the girl in the photograph? What did she want? Why was Anna hearing her? Anna backed away from the door, her mind racing. Could she get out? Could she escape? She had to. The whispers were growing louder now, overwhelming her. They weren't just whispers anymore. They were voices. "Help me. You have to help me." The words were clearer now. And then, Anna realized something. The voice wasn't coming from the walls or the air. It was coming from somewhere else. From the floor. Her breath caught in her throat as she stared down at the ground. The floorboards, old and worn, seemed to shift under her feet. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, a crack appeared between the boards. Anna bent down, her hands shaking as she reached out. She pried one of the boards loose, and beneath it, she found something she didn't expect. An old, weathered journal, its pages yellowed with age. Anna's fingers trembled as she opened the journal. It was filled with scrawled handwriting, a girl's handwriting. But as she flipped through the pages, she could feel her pulse quicken. The words were nonsensical at first, but then one entry caught her eye. "I am here. They can't hear me, but I can hear them." Her heart raced. Who had written this? And who was they? The voices. The journal went on to describe strange events at St. Margaret's High. The fire, the unexplained noises, and most chilling of all, the girl who had vanished in the flames. Anna's eyes widened as she read the last entry. "I saw her today. She's not gone. She's still here and she's looking for me." Anna dropped the journal. Her hands were shaking, her mind spinning with fear and confusion. She couldn't understand what was happening, but she felt it. The truth was finally coming to the surface. The girl in the photograph, the whispers, the shadows. It was all tied to the fire, to Emily. And that's when Anna knew. The girl in the photo wasn't just a ghost. She wasn't just a memory. She was trapped. And Anna was the key to setting her free. The room grew colder still, and Anna could feel the whispers growing more desperate, more frantic. She knew she had to act fast, or else. She didn't want to think about what might happen if she didn't. The door finally creaked open, the lock giving way as though it had been waiting for Anna to find the truth. She stumbled out, clutching the journal to her chest. The hallway was empty, but she didn't feel alone. The whispers still followed her, louder than before, urging her to go faster. She had to get out. She had to find out what had happened to Emily. The school was different now, darker, more oppressive. Anna couldn't ignore the truth anymore. She wasn't just a student at St. Margaret's High. She was a part of this story now, a story that was far older than her, a story that had been waiting for someone to uncover it. And Emily was waiting too. For Anna to help her finish what was started. Anna's breath came in ragged gasps as she sprinted through the hallways of St. Margaret's. The whispers had stopped, but she could feel them lingering in the back of her mind, echoing in her ears. "You're too late. She's still here." The school felt different now. The walls seemed to close in on her, the halls stretching farther than they should have, as if trying to swallow her whole. She couldn't understand why, but something inside her told her she had to go back. Back to the room with the photograph. Back to Emily. Her heart pounded in her chest as she reached the old wing again. The door to the room creaked open on its own, as though it had been waiting for her. The room was colder than before, the air thick with tension. The photograph on the wall was still there, but something had changed. The face of the girl, Emily, was clearer now, more defined. Her eyes seemed to follow Anna as she stepped closer, her expression more intense, almost pleading. "Please, help me." The voice came again, but this time, it was different. It wasn't just a whisper. It was clear, like Emily was standing right next to her. Anna's hands shook as she reached up to touch the photograph. Emily's eyes locked onto hers, and for a brief moment, Anna felt a strange connection, like they were linked by something far greater than just this school, this moment. "You have to finish it." Emily's voice whispered again, urgent, desperate. Anna didn't understand at first, but then the memories came flooding back. The fire, the screams, the chaos. Emily had died in the fire, trapped in this very building. But why hadn't she moved on? Why hadn't she found peace? It was then that Anna remembered something from the journal, the entry about the girl who vanished in the fire. Emily hadn't died in the flames. She had been trapped in the spirit world, caught between the living and the dead. And that's why the whispers, the shadows, the cold, they were all signs of her lingering, waiting to be set free. But how? Suddenly, Anna's mind flashed to the one thing she hadn't thought of. The fire. There had been an old locked room in the back of the building where the flames had started. No one had ever been able to open it, not even after the fire had been put out. The room was sealed shut, the memories of that night erased by the school. It was there, Emily's unfinished story. Anna had to go there. She had to open the door. The air grew heavy as she turned, heading towards the back of the school. The hallway was longer now, the shadows stretching farther than before. She could feel the weight of Emily's presence beside her, pushing her forward. The door was just ahead. When she reached it, Anna didn't hesitate. She knew what she had to do. Her hand trembled as she touched the door, the coldness biting into her fingertips. The whispers had stopped now, the silence deafening. She pressed her body against the door, her heart pounding in her chest. It was time. She pushed with all her strength. The door groaned, the lock creaking as it began to give way. Then, with one final push, the door swung open. And what Anna saw inside took her breath away. The room was dark, but it was more than that. It was frozen in time. Everything was untouched, as if nothing had changed since that night. The smoke stains on the walls, the scorched desk in the corner, and in the middle of it all, a burned photograph of Emily. But this photograph was different. It was complete. Emily's face was full of life, her eyes filled with hope. And then Anna saw it, the small, faded words at the bottom of the photo. "I am free." The whispers stopped. The air grew still. Anna felt it. Emily was gone. As Anna stood in the doorway, the weight that had been pressing on her for so long lifted. The coldness disappeared. The shadows melted away. Emily had found peace. And so had Anna. The school, once so dark and oppressive, seemed to lighten. The halls weren't as long, the rooms not as cold. Anna had set Emily free, and in return, she had freed herself too. As she walked out of the old wing for the last time, Anna knew one thing for certain. Some stories never really end. They just wait for the right person to finish them. And some doors, once open, can never be closed again.